Why I think they always put that inflator in there.
No, it was, yeah, it was this median and 2%. I had to make sure that she recorded it. Yeah, it's just how it was working.
So they're always undershare
percentage.
not elected.
Back into that discussion. We're totally, totally. It's like, oh, please don't let us do that. Don't let us do that. That's a good win, man.
So next year, his salary will go up 2 or 3%. That's just automatic inflator.
Are we going to the sheriff now?
What's that? Oh, I thought you had.
We're just talking.
Who's the one with the whole
They call the cost of increase.
Just watch it.
Okay. Trying to figure out.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Unrepresented. He's maxed out at.
You're gonna motion happy today, aren't you?
Getting 2%.
It's like, hey, look, we're doing this, we're doing this.
We're just down to actually doing it, so.
Whatever the.
We're
Tell
not
us
going
what
to
to
make a
do.
motion. Then yes, I have a motion.
We budget out.
That's all I make up for that.
I agree.
I'd rather have them
All
say no, at least move us on to the next point,
I agree.
than,
All they
so
usually
yeah.
do.
I've sat on committees that have spent 4 years arguing the same question at the national level.
The reason why I'm not
Well,
so,
I said,
just trying not to make that motion of the vote in that
that's something that we are.
I was just.
So yes, I don't mind making a motion.
Absolutely, I'm glad we had it here.
Everybody can sit and stare. I've seen it happen for years.
And you don't have this to put up on the screen, do you? Are you
No, I do not.
to do this from shared copy? That is completely.
The spreadsheet that Mary was sharing.
Oh. You ready?
Yeah, the answer is no. Okay, good. Yeah, so we're back. That was a short celebration for making a very major monumental decision.
I'll have wine when I go home.
I just want to take a moment of privilege as chair to say, Mary Jo, I appreciate you in raising topics. I appreciate the conversation that we've been having. It's very healthy. Everybody's engaged. Sometimes you wonder if anybody, if, you know, some people are tracking along, and everybody is. So we have a decision to make next with regards to the sheriff's salary, base salary. That does not get us off the hook of next week. I think we will have a resolution that we will put together, and I think need to adopt that too, right? Or even though we will have already adopted the salary schedule.
You have to file your decision
We have to file.
with the auditor. So the format in which you file,
Needs
you'll have to, you guys
decide.
should decide that. Yeah.
Perfect. So that's not reason to belabor this conversation into next week unless we find we need to. Excuse me, I'm going to refer us all to page 4. There was some confusion before the break, before the commercial break, on where's the sheriff's median. There is only one position for sheriff. And so if you look on page 4, under the column for sheriff, the current salary, base salary for the sheriff is $162.26. That's on line 20. The lines below that are the sheriff's salary for the 9 comparable counties. The highest is Skagit County, the lowest at 186, 261, and the lowest is Walla Walla County at 119, 745. The median of those 9 comparables is 148, 370. That places the Mason County Sheriff's salary at 8% above the median. So I'd open it up for conversation with regards to the median salary that's indicated there or other options. Mary Jo.
I would be in favor of freezing the sheriff's salary, not cutting, which is what we would do if we went to the median.
So keep it where it is.
Keep it where it is, and the other discussion we need to have is the 5% of the undersheriffs. I think that's the bigger question.
So if we make this decision, it supersedes that. It no longer becomes relevant. We are setting the salary based on the median, and that supersedes the 5% over the
Well, it wouldn't be
undersheriff.
set on median, it'd be set on keeping him where he is, and so we'd have to decide.
We can decide what that salary is, and so what I heard was that you suggested the consideration for freezing was your word. And freezing would be at 162.26. So how that number has been presently determined no longer becomes relevant. It is 162.26. We could
Makes sense.
make a decision to keep the methodology as it is right now, 5% above the undersheriff as an alternative. But if we freeze it at 162.26, that is what it is, and that's our decision.
So we could freeze it at 162.26 until such time as the undersheriff comes closer than the 5%? At
No,
that point?
our decisions are,
But, come on,
our decision is to effectuate a change to the salary effective May 1 of 2024. That would be effective through December 31st of 2026 is the decision that we're making here. Or
we could freeze it so that
we could freeze it until,
until such a time as the undersheriff comes closer than 5%.
I think that our decisions are effective May 1 through December 31 of 2026. We don't have the option to float a salary in between per the law, if I'm understanding the interpretation that you received, Diane and Mark.
I believe that that is correct, that you actually have the ability to set the salary. The first period you're setting the salary for is they call, in the resolution it says 2025 and 26. That covers the period May 1st, 2024, all the way through December 31st, 2026. But you can determine or set a specific time period where you would want to increase a salary. So if you wanted to say that that you wanted to freeze it from May 1st through December 31st, 2025, and then in 2026 you wanted to increase it, you could actually do that.
Except for the fact, my understanding that you and Diane shared is that we're setting salaries for a 2-year period of time.
Correct.
And so that 2-year period of time would start January 1 of 2025 and go through 2026. So as we did with the 2-step for the other elected officials, it was all right to increase it May 1 and then do a second step January 1, but not January 1 of 2026.
You guys can do whatever you
Okay.
determine to do.
Okay.
Is the sheriff's salary currently at 5% above the undersheriff?
Yes, ma'am.
It is, so
Yes.
that's where it is.
And it looks like that was the model in 2024, current, 2023, 2022, 2021.
Well, 2019, I believe, is the resolution that
Correct.
Jan
Yeah.
read earlier.
I would prefer, personally, the median would cause that position harm, so I'm not,
Yeah, by harm you mean
if it was a reduction.
it would reduce, so you would,
Yeah.
I don't want to cause them harm.
So we could keep the sheriff's salary as it is with the 5% and let it continue the way it is with the 5% above the undersheriff.
We could adopt that as
We
the
can do
method.
whatever, yeah, we can do whatever we want at that point. Can somebody clarify for me that verbiage in that, is it that his salary is to always be exactly 5% more, or is it to be no
Yes.
less than 5% more?
Always be.
It is currently 5% more than the base salary of the undersheriff.
That is his salary to the dollar
Yes,
Yes.
at this point. Okay.
yes.
Do we know if the undersheriff is on, already at the last step, or do we know where he is in the step process?
I would have to verify, but I believe that the undersheriff is on step 9.
So he has one more step,
I believe so.
plus cost of living.
Correct. Which has not been determined yet, so the sheriff is in a non-represented position.
The undersheriff.
Excuse me, thank you, Jen. The undersheriff is in a non-represented position. So the normal process is the commissioners actually go through and negotiate contracts for union contracts that are open in 2024. And then close to the end of the year, they will set an across-the-board increase for all non-represented folks. The undersheriff would receive that across-the-board increase that the commissioners set, and that would go into place January 1st, 2025.
So we could basically decide to leave the sheriff alone and not do anything with the sheriff and let
We,
that continue the way it's always been.
so, here's where it gets difficult for me. One, if we chose to do that, and we could do that, we would need to pass that as a motion to do so. Because my understanding is that we cannot leave in place the way that the salaries have been currently determined. We have to adopt it as our own. My read, and this was the conversation that Mark and Diane and I had before from your conversation with Tim Whitehead, was that when we set the salaries, they're in place for 2 years. And the way that the resolution that enacted us reads is that we set the salary May 1st, and it goes into effect the following January 1.
Except this year, it's gonna go into effect.
Yeah, so let's hold what's happening right now, because this is new, but it says that any change in salary shall be filed by the commission with the county auditor no later than May 1, 2024, and no later than May 1st every 2 years thereafter. So that's where I got the 2 years from, is that, let's say in a future year, we would set it by May 1st, it would go into effect January 1 the following year for 2 years. Whether it can float based on a percentage of somebody else's, I suppose that's legal. I'm not an attorney to interpret.
So I'm not an attorney either. But as you all saw in the data that you looked at, some counties actually tie their elected officials to a percentage of the Superior Court judge. So that there is a
Precedent
precedence
for it
out
to
there
float.
for that being said.
That helps. Somebody, we'll get to it in a second. Somebody early on did raise the question, and I probably should know who the undersheriff is. I probably heard the name, but
Travis Adams.
thank you. So I do know who the undersheriff is. Sorry, Undersheriff Adams, if you're watching. If the undersheriff was replaced and somebody came in new with lesser experience and a lower, what are they called, position? Step. The way that it currently reads is that would then decrease the sheriff's salary.
Do we know that that's what would happen?
That's the way that it seems that it would happen right now. The Board of County Commissioners previously would then need to decide whether or not to keep it the same or not. We, based on the implementing resolution, don't have that flexibility to reconvene to set a salary at that point, based on my read of this, unless somebody understands it differently. So we would need to wait until the spring, first quarter of 2026 to reconsider that by May 1 of 2026, and then change the methodology we use in January 1 of 2027. if that were to occur.
So hypothetically, it would be, going back, it would be a percentage above what we just talked about today at the median.
Yeah.
Right, so it would be where we want to get to. Step one would be a percentage increase that would be above to get it at, and then step two would be an equal increase. So it's
Yeah.
like- I can't do that math in my head, but like 35% above the other elected officials. I mean, that's a guesstimate. It could be.
So let me get the sense that we're talking about a hypothetical option. Is this something that the group as a whole, I brought it up just as an alternative to freezing the salary, because that's what currently exists. It wasn't brought up on my part because I'm necessarily supportive of that idea. But about 3 weeks ago, or maybe the first meeting that we had when we got together, my sense was that we would want to take a really close look at maintaining how the sheriff's salary is currently determined, 5% above the undersheriff, and somehow I had it in my mind, and it could have been my own mind only, that there was an inclination not to do that. So is there an inclination to consider that, or are we just talking about this as a hypothetical right now?
To cover your bases, it seems like we should make it so that it never is any less than 5%.
Above
More.
the undersheriff?
Yes.
Or we
Not
can say-
tied to it hard and fast, because then you run into the situation like you're talking about, where something happens that the undersheriff salary takes it.
So the way,
dive.
the way to do that would be to ensure that it never decreased from the current level.
Right.
So,
What we-
Somehow, you know.
What we could do is say that it stays at 5% above step 10 in this under sheriff's salary.
yeah, so initially you were in favor of freezing the salary. Are you
No, freezing,
freezing
Yeah.
it currently, right? Is that still your thought?
but now, no,
Okay,
no.
you're changing on me.
I'd change it to make it 5% above the highest step for the undersheriff.
Which would increase the sheriff's salary higher than the comparables. So greater than the 8% as of January.
But we're still looking at median, which is not the highest. You know, I mean, it's still fall within the comps. But it would give us something stable.
Yeah, the struggle with that is the position, it's an outlier with the rest of them. And so that is the struggle I think we all have is this outlier. And in the comparables, it's pretty comparable
Right.
for an average or median. But we do need to tie it to something. And
At
I'm
the
not
same
oppo-
time, we just gave everybody else a,
And I'm not
a
opposed to
10%,
looking
you
at
know,
continuing with the
20%
current
rating.
model that's been established.
So Richard, yeah, sorry, Matt, Richard, the reason we did that, the conversation was because the others were significantly below the median.
I'm aware of that, but still, you got a situation where we all convened, we gave everybody across the board a 20% raise, except the sheriff. And even though he's already pretty even, you know, we gotta kind of toss the guy a bone because he's doing one of the worst jobs there is out there. And during his questionnaire, you know, he says, I think the salary's okay.
Yeah, and he said that,
You know.
yeah,
So, you know, you're all worried about taxpayers and voters and so forth having their nose out of joint because we're doing this stuff, but, you know, I would want the sheriff to be happy at the end of all this, too, in my opinion.
Brent?
Or we can take maybe a little bit of hybrid of both. We can freeze the sheriff's salary now until the first opportunity we have to change it. If he is above or if the 160,226 is now below the average median, and then we can bring him up to the average median at that time, and then everybody would be tied to the average median across the board.
The next time we review the salaries, is that where,
Yeah.
the first part? Yeah.
Which would be the, what, 26, January 26,
January 27th.
27.
So for this decision, we would be freezing it until that next decision is essentially, right?
Yes, and then you make a resolution at the same time to start figuring his salary based on
The median,
on
the same
average-
approach.
average median, the same approach.
So in this case, it's just the median or the average median is the same, so, yeah, so basically, what I think I hear you saying, Brent, is because the sheriff's salary is above the median now, we would keep it as is. We would reevaluate that in the first 4 months of 2026 to go into effect of January 1 of 2027.
Yeah. And then you.
As we-
All the same, no, we're all the same.
As we would with all others' decisions. So Lee,
So,
I think that means you have your hand raised.
yeah, it's been a minute. I do have a question for Mark possibly, or maybe Diane can answer it. With the undersheriff, when does he get his increases, when do they come into effect? Is that Jan 1 still?
I assume he is a January 1.
Okay.
Some people are like when they were hired, but most of us now have moved to a January 1 step date.
I believe that is correct based on a conversation I had with Mary, that because there was a question a couple meetings ago about whether that was taking place April 1st, and she said no, that had already occurred for this year.
Okay.
Yeah, two parts of
January
the
1
January
is
1.
when his step increase.
And then, my next thought is we, as a group, when we were talking about it earlier, I think it was meeting 1 or meeting 2, we noticed that yet again, the sheriff could lose like however much money, whether it be $60,000 or $50,000 or whatever, if the undersheriff should leave his position for any reason, if we brought in a new undersheriff and started him off at step 1. Okay, because the way he's tied to the undersheriff's salary currently. If we were to leave it at that 5% benchmark, I think that we need to also strongly consider putting some type of freeze in place where if the undersheriff leaves the position for any reason and a new one is hired, then the sheriff's salary is stopped where it is if the 5% difference is not met. That way he's not losing X amount of dollars that day. Because I don't know about any of y'all, but if I lost half my wage or a third of my wage
I think that,
in a day, that'd be a problem.
I don't know if this, what the salary ranges are, but I don't believe that the undersheriff is the.
Well, it may not be
would
that
possible.
drastic.
Yeah.
But the point is that, you know, for him to lose several thousands of dollars, you know, especially in the current financial market, it could be detrimental to.
Could I ask this question? Why is this salary, we don't know why this salary is tied to the undersheriff.
I'm assuming it's to make sure that the sheriff is always paid more than the undersheriff, because
So
to have
that-
an undersheriff paid
so
more than the
that-
sheriff is an insult, honestly.
So that comment came up by every single other elected, or several other elected officials, right? And that their deputies are paid more in some cases than the elected officials.
Yes.
So I would be personally careful, because then we're setting a different standard for the sheriff.
That's a good point, thank you.
So, Roger, there's a couple of hands, I don't know who, are you sure?
I flashed my hand, but you made the point I was gonna bring up.
Okay.
That non-represented salary schedule is in the binder. And it's on mine, it's
Get to count tabs.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5th tab in, and it's labeled non-represented salary range alignment with 2% ATV
And ATV stands for
across the board.
Yep.
The 5th tab. looks like this.
Yeah, it's labeled non-represented salary range alignment with 2% ATE.
Under sheriff.
Under sheriff is in range 48.
48.
Bottom of the list, yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, Matt, go ahead.
So rough math, we believe the undersheriff right now is at step 9.
Okay.
So that gives you that salary range.
I just want to throw something out for consideration. You guys can tell me I'm crazy, but if we link it to the Superior Court judge, as 1/6 of the counties in our thing do, if I average out the different percentages they use, that comes up to 72.5%, which would make his salary about 165, give or take change. And it would always be linked to that, which would protect it from ever going down in the case, which usually they don't, usually counties or usually governments don't go down, they usually freeze you until it comes back up to that spot, but I don't know how it works here. I don't know how that was intended to work, but we could go an entirely different way that seems to give him stability.
Without taking a wage cut.
Yeah. So that's just one idea. I have no problem with staying with the 5% either, just the way they're doing it right now. That's not a problem for me.
And what Mary Jo kind of floated out there was the possibility of the sheriff would be paid at a percentage greater than the maximum step of the undersheriff. What if they go to
I don't have a
step,
problem with that either.
if they create a new step 11, it would still be the
What
max.
does that math look like on your, if you go to step 10, right now, that's the maximum.
Well, step 10 is 156,411. Can't do that in my head.
162.
164
231.
if we did the 5%.
If that would be that's 5% above step 10 for 2024.
So we're still right at even money, pretty much with what she was saying, being tied to the Superior Court
Yeah.
judge as well.
It'd be a little less
Yeah.
than that.
Well, a little easier to understand for everybody else, it seems like. As
So-
anybody who hadn't been in these meetings tried to figure out what we were doing, we just as lost as we started out to be.
The average, when I averaged the 6 percentages, it averaged to 72.5. And the judge will be making July 1, 228,261, which is the amount I would recommend we go by. And that would get him up to, I don't know if somebody can do
70.2% of the Superior Court judge salary is
72.5.
70.2.
0.2 is
70.2%.
what?
His current salary
Okay.
is the percentage of
70.2.
70.2
And
is,
I'm saying this average for the counties that we selected is, who use that method, is 72.5.
I see,
So
because
that would
it's
give him a small raise.
72, 65,
I'm
80.
gonna use the 228, 261.
So not all of, so 7 of the 9 counties,
Oh, 7?
sorry,
I counted 6.
there's actually 1, 2,
1, 2, 3.
3, 4, 5 of the counties, 5 of the 9 determine their sheriff's salary as a percentage of the Superior Court judge.
Okay.
The other,
No?
in the case of Island County, they do not base it on that.
Right.
And then Walla Walla, Jefferson, and Kittitas County do not handle it that way.
So I got Clallam is 72.
Yep,
Cowlitz is 65.
yep,
Grays Harbor is 80.
yes.
Yep.
I just, Jefferson, I used 65, which was kind of a
So
rounding.
it's not, they don't use that, so,
They don't.
so we can't include that. So here's the
Let me go
challenge
through
I'm
this.
having with this approach is that we're changing the methodology, which may be what the desire of the group is. We're changing the methodology because of we're not using all 9 comparable counties. That was used for all of the other elected officials. We're then,
Chairman Jim?
yes, I'll be with you in a second, Mr. Dunkel.
Okay.
So when there's only 5 of the 9 counties that use a percentage of the Superior Court judge, so we're limiting it further to try and achieve a goal, which I think is to try and increase the sheriff's salary, because we increase everybody else's salary. And I would go back to what I responded to Richard in saying that the reason we saw the increase or need to increase everybody else's salary is because they were so far behind the comparable counties, all 9 of the comparable counties. So we have that list, that running list of salary considerations, and we have a different list that we're developing now for the sheriff. And I'm not understanding why we are doing that differently. That's perhaps something that I have to think through,
In
but.
my opinion, the sheriff does a very different job than everybody else. Drastically different job.
To be
than
fair,
the rest of the people on the list.
to be fair, each person has an individual job. The only ones that are similar would be the commissioners in general. The clerk is a different job than the commissioner, the treasurer is a different job than the coroner, so on and so forth.
Obviously.
Yeah, and I think that's in part reflected already presently in the difference in salary, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Auditor Dunkel, you had your hand raised, and if you're answering a question regarding what we're currently talking on, that would be great. Or we can also have public comment, which in this meeting, I'm not sure which it is, so perhaps you're responding to help us answer a question.
Well, I wanted to chime in a little bit because the Salary Commission was chartered to set salaries, and that's different than setting a formula for salaries. Setting a formula for salaries is something that would normally be handled through a resolution, and I don't think that's what this commission is chartered to do. I would want to talk to Tim Whitehead, our deputy prosecuting attorney, on Wednesday about this, because I really believe that this commission is chartered to set salaries from period to period when the salary commission convenes. That's not establish a formula.
Okay, I
So,
understand.
yeah, so I understand your interpretation, and we would have to rely on legal counsel in order to be able to make that call, is what I also heard you say.
Aren't we just?
So the resolution never contemplated setting a formula, it's just said set the salary.
Yeah, and I think the interpretation of this commission is that we have the latitude to be able to set the salary in whatever manner that we saw fit, which could be a formula. It could be determined as the other counties have as a percentage of Superior Court judge salaries. It could be as it is currently for our sheriff at 5% above. If the Board of County Commissioners wanted to put bumpers or define things, then that's something that the resolution could have further articulated, that it needs to be a set number versus not be a formula-based approach. So I think what I'd like to do is find out the sort of what we're trying to move towards is understanding what the commission here is trying to do, and I appreciate your thought there, but I'll continue the conversation here with what this group feels, and then I'll ask that.
So all I'm saying is before you guys head down that type of a path, we really need to talk to our
I'm sorry, Auditor Dunkel. As chair, I'm sort of trying to get a consensus of this group. And then, as I was about to say, I will confer with the county administrator what the question, if confirm that our approach is within the law set by the Board of County Commissioners.
You're asking us to talk to Tim Whitehead?
Well, I don't know yet because I don't know
Okay.
what the consensus of this group is. We're taken off a little bit off the track because of what we can or can't do. My understanding is that we can do set the salaries however we would like to, versus a specific number. So that's what I'd
Yeah, this, for
probably.
me, the struggle is the position, the way it's been formatted in the past. If we're setting a salary, I think the group is in some loose agreement, we don't wanna see economic harm come to this position. We don't wanna see a decrease in salary. If we have to set a salary, then it's working off of, I guess, current level of compensation. Is that adequate for the 2 years? Or do we put a salary, a two-step salary increase in this? It would more than likely be less than what we had proposed for the other positions. Or do we continue to maintain it tied to that under-sheriff position at a certain
Yeah.
percentage?
If I'm understanding him
So
correctly, he's saying that we shouldn't be setting standards for years to come. We're just supposed to do a dollar figure for this period.
That is the auditor's interpretation of the
Right.
law. That's not the
Right.
legal interpretation
Right,
of the law.
okay.
So
Gotcha.
we'll seek that.
That's what he's,
That's
what he's saying.
That's what his
Yeah.
interpretation is,
Yes,
right?
gotcha.
So Lee.
So, really quick, first of all, we've already set a formula. We've already done that when we set the salaries for everybody else.
Well, an approach, you mean, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've already done that with using the average median,
Yep.
okay? We're using comparable counties, part of the formula. That's how we came to our decision, and sounds like a good plan to me. Secondly, what I do suggest is if we are going to consult Deputy Prosecutor Whitehead, that we set up a formula, or suggest a formula answer for the sheriff, like the Superior Court judge tie-in, or a straight dollar amount. That way we have both bases covered for whatever his answer is. That way we can make sure that it's implemented next meeting, and we can continue on without having to worry about that discussion next meeting when our decision is due.
And we could just say, let's give him a 5% raise and be done with it. And
Like-
walk away.
Like I said.
For
we
no
either do-
reason at all, just because that's what we think we should do.
Yeah, like I said, we either have a straight increase or we have a formula
Gotcha.
increase, but
Yeah.
both bases are covered. We're golden for next
Mm.
meeting.
What was the step 10 for that position again?
It's right here,
158, 411.03.
right here.
Well, I did something terrible.
Is that a 58 or 56?
So what does that give him?
That looks like a 156, 411.03 mark.
So what if we
156.
put, yep, so my understanding then, given this,
Get out your glasses, sir.
Thank
using,
you. You're correct, I'm old.
if we were just to set a salary at 5% above this figure, which I'm not sure what
Which is
that-
step 10 of.
which is about $7,000 more, I believe.
Hmm?
So it's approximately 7.5% more than what it is now, maybe? What's the difference between the steps?
2.5%. So you're correct, it is 156, I apologize.
So, and
No
again,
worries.
why are, we're doing this because we feel.
2.5% between steps.
Thank you, Mary.
So
So-
my guess is, I mean, then he will not be given, if the undersheriff reaches the maximum step in another year, and then has cost of living increases on top of that, he could be making more than the sheriff at some point in time, conceivably.
Yes.
So if we are looking at setting a salary and not a methodology like that, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what Steve said, I think we have to consider that we have to go above what cost of living raises.
So can I offer a different perspective?
Sure.
And I appreciate, Richard, what you said, that you consider the sheriff's position differently. If the cost of living of adjustment for all statewide elected officials is 3%.
Okay.
So if
This year.
Correct. So let's just assume, because we don't know what the next couple of years is gonna be, that it's gonna be 3% for resetting the salaries. If that was the case and we roll that forward to 2025 and 2026, the sheriffs would still be at or above the median of the comparable counties.
Yes.
I believe personally, sorry, I'm trying to hold back, that is in line with our approach to how we treated the other elected officials with their unique and respective responsibilities. And the difference between the sheriff and the other electeds is reflected already in the salary that each is currently making. Right, or the new salaries that we're establishing for the electeds and the sheriff's current salary. So the difference between those, in other words, that we have a median of 148,370 for the sheriff for the 9 comparable counties versus 101, 102 to 104.5. That difference between the 44,000 is already reflective of the unique position of the sheriff.
So you're in favor of leaving his salary like it is?
That would be my personal opinion, yes.
Okay.
And then when we get, as Brent mentioned, when we get to the point where we're reviewing this again, which happens in, prior to May 1 of 2026, we would have the opportunity again to establish, or to review and determine whether or not that salary was holding form or holding true to the comparables of the other 9 counties. And if it wasn't, if it had fallen behind at that point, we could make a decision to adjust it upwards based on the approach that we've used for the other electeds to move to the median, or in their case, the average of the median, because it was 6 positions, or keep it the same at that point in time. But we have that built-in mechanism. What's it seems to me that the current state has been that because the salary for the sheriff was set by resolution in 2019, it would then take a future commission, Board of County Commissioners, to change that if they wanted to do 7% above the undersheriff, or if they wanted to use a different methodology or formula, or if they wanted to pick a different number, right? So they could adjust it at that point.
It sounds like to me, from what everybody is saying, that whatever number we decide on, whether it be to keep it the same or give him a raise or what have you, sort of makes that irrelevant, because then this committee will reconvene the next time that it comes around. And if the undersheriff quits and they hire a new one or whatever, the salary changes, it won't matter, because we will then decide, or whoever's in the committee at the time, will decide what the sheriff's salary should be moving forward from there. So it won't matter. The 5% tied to the undersheriff won't have any bearing on.
That's my understanding,
Yeah,
right? It would be
okay.
set, and it wouldn't
So all that
float, we
discussion
wouldn't have to get
is
any, we wouldn't have to,
irrelevant, yeah.
we wouldn't have to develop any complexity or a formula in
Right.
order to ensure that it
Just
would only
make a
go up,
decision.
it wouldn't go down.
Mhm, gotcha.
We would just set it and establish it, and
Yes.
If we use the highest rate, current highest rate of 156, whatever, and you give that a 5% above that, plus an additional 3% on top of that, that's 169, 158, 50 cents approximately.
and
If we do 2 cost of living raises at 3%, once again, stacked, I'm not adding all the percentages together, I'm stacking them on top of each other.
Mhm.
That's 174, 233.25 approximately. So that's another thing we could do, is just set the salary at one of those, or at one of those for a period of time with a step 2 to the other one, or some combination thereof.
so we're at 7:30. I would plead the pleasure, or whatever you say that, of the group to extend for another 20 minutes to see if we can get through this discussion rather than waiting until next week.
I move to extend.
Let's do it.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Braden said I also.
So just to kind of reiterate what Jim said earlier, if we stick to the methodology we had addressed before with the commissioners to get them to the median, in essence, that sheriff's position would be kind of frozen until the rest of those positions, the rest of the averages in those other counties, whatever counties they choose on, raises up. And so, but I'm not super keen on being hard and fast on that one, since we are looking at cost of living increases with other groups. So I think that discussion about finding a number and doing a COLA of some kind.
So,
But that's the discussion that I guess in front of
Mary, could I ask you to comment on how this works on staff salaries, or their, I guess, non-repped salaries? If there's an increase in comparables, or if you see a position that is making more than the comparables, what happens within the county? Does that question make sense?
So if someone's over market, is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
So if someone's over market, usually what the commissioners have done is they'll Y rate and just let them accrue. They do not believe in taking money away from employees.
So Y rate means they keep the salary, it's a freeze, and not decrease it?
Yes, and then no steps are across the board until they reach that threshold, at which point it will then pick up again once they reach the threshold.
Thank you.
So we're back to freezing the salary.
Well, if that's the will of the group.
Now it's a Y rate.
So, well, we're assuming the undersheriff is going somewhere where they may or may not be, but so 160, so right now, the top step was 5% is 164, 200, or $164,231.58. A 3% cost of living raise on that, once again, is 169,158.50, give or take cents. And then another 3% on that is 174,233 for 28 cents, and 28 cents. So we could set the salaries somewhere in there.
We could. So help me understand, Jan, why we are taking a different approach than we did for the other electeds. Because in the other electeds case, if we were to do that similarly, we would take their deputy, which is the undersheriff for the sheriff, and we would go and figure out where the top step 10 is for those deputy positions.
Well, we can redo our work and
we've
do
already,
that again now.
But that's where I'm kind of like, when trying to explain this to the public, like why did we approach the sheriff differently than we did the others? How would we explain that?
Has the cost of living increase been applied to these figures yet for this
Yes.
year?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, the
Yeah, it's in line 22.
yeah. So the way that it works again is all of the blue numbers are based on Superior Court judge salaries, and the black numbers, the 3% has already been applied
Okay.
to that. So in essence, the first 3% that Jan was talking about has already been included in the
For this year.
black numbers. And you can see up above that the increase from 217,391 to 228,261 for the Superior Court judge. I don't know what that increase is off the top of my head. And then furthermore, all of the salaries where you can see, like in Grace Harbor County, the 97% is the RPP, that's the regional adjustment, the price adjustment for Mason County, so that's been applied in here as well. So we have the cost of living increase that's incorporated into these numbers, either via the Superior Court judge salary increases or the 3%, if that,
Well,
because.
for the sheriff, it doesn't look like it's applied according to your graph. That's what I was asking the question.
All of the numbers down below, so from lines 23 to line 31 is where that's applied.
The 3% is added to
The 3%,
okay.
and so then we look at the median salary of the 148,370 compared to what the sheriff's currently making at 160. The 160's not been increased by 3%.
That's what I was trying to ask.
Because currently, the undersheriff's salary increased January 1,
Right.
and the
July.
sheriff's salary went 5% above that increase.
Okay, so you got a COO.
I see.
Yeah.
That was figured into that 5%.
So the undersheriff goes up, whatever that went up for the cost of living adjustment, the sheriff is 5% above that.
All right, okay.
So, first, I know Devin was gonna ask something.
Yeah, wait before I do.
Okay, so, for sake of expedience, what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at 3 different options here that I've heard specifically. The first is to move the sheriff's salary to step 10 of the undersheriff plus 5% and continue, cost of living increase per year. The second one is to keep his salary tied to the SCJ right now, the Superior Court Judge, at 70.2%.
That is not current, what we do currently. That would be a new.
Hey, team, I need to jump in if I could. I just talked to Tim.
So I'm sorry, Auditor Dunkel. I'm going to keep the conversation around this room and chair this meeting, and then if we need an interpretation from the deputy prosecutor, we'll work that out subsequently to that. We appreciate
Okay.
that. Thank you.
Well, I just spoke with him, and I can really help simplify things for if you just wanted.
So I'd like, yeah, you're interrupting the vice chair of the commission right now, who is trying to articulate his summary of where we're at. And so that's why I'm trying to get us move forward, because we've already extended 20 minutes for tonight, and we're trying to reach some decision. So I appreciate you reaching out, but I need to try and keep this meeting on track. So
I appreciate that. I'm just trying to help save you guys some time, that's all.
Lee?
Okay, so, from what I understand, it was at 70.2% of Superior Court Judge, which is what it's currently at?
So it's 72% for those counties that use that as a percentage, which was 5 of the 9.
Okay, that was 72.5. Cause
Yeah,
I
and
heard,
that was before.
that was your
he-
math.
He corrected it.
Yeah.
And so now it's only 70%.
Yeah, okay,
Is
so
the
I
average.
wanted to make sure which one of those 70% it was.
Okay.
So now that we've broken that down, it sounds like we have the step 10 plus 5% and continue cost of living increase per year. Or we can tie it to what percentage of it is the Superior Court Judge as it stands right now.
So that's 2. The third is to keep the salary as it is.
To
And
keep
the
the salary.
third is, yeah,
I'd like to throw in a 4th option,
okay.
and that's just to add the 3% cost of living to the sheriff's salary as it is now.
That was
And
already
call
added
it a day.
Jan 1.
I'm talking about another one.
Oh,
So one more 3%.
Yes, right now,
And then that
Yes.
goes through December 2026.
yes.
So that's a fourth option, 3% plus current.
But I don't think
Okay, I
that's
got
gonna apply.
confused in here. So your 72.5 is actually 70.5?
Right, so when I took the Jefferson County one out, that lowered it to 70%, which I think might even be a decrease from where he is currently.
So-
70%.
So we have 4 options, and there's probably a lot of options. Again, I keep on trying to bring us back to the 3 options that you presented, Lee, are different than the approach that we took for the other elected officials. And so I would need to have an understanding as to why that's the case. Why are we treating the approach to the sheriff differently than the other elected
Well, we
officials?
kept the sheriff separate all the way along with the idea in mind that we were going to use a different approach.
Because the salary was different, we didn't want to incorporate that into the median or the average of the medians, or because that would dramatically have increased the other elected salaries greater. That was sort of the methodology, and because I figured that there would be more conversation, which there is around the sheriff.
So
You were right.
part
Listen, right.
of the reason why I'm looking at the 3 or 4 options now as the way they are is because number one, when we were looking at the medians and averages, the vast majority of the salaries that were proposed or that the other counties use were already tied to the SCJ. And so that's where I came up with the SCJ from.
5 of the 9, right?
No, not just for the sheriff. but when we discussed all the others as well.
Oh, the other's true, but as
Yeah.
far as the sheriff's position, which is what we're
Yeah,
talking
there's
about
only
now,
five
there's
of
only
them.
five.
But you're asking why I came
Yep.
up with this separate methodology.
Yep.
Okay, so the other ones were already, the vast majority of them were already tied to the SCJ. Okay, so that already sets a precedence for tying it to the SCJ by law of averages, in compared to the clerk and the assessor and all that. The second one is the step 10 plus 5% in continued cost of living per year, and that's pretty much where we are now with the undersheriff being the sheriff being 5% above the undersheriff. The difference in this one is we're maxing out his step, and then that's the base salary plus 5%, and then cost of living after that. It just eliminates that last step increase currently.
Well, and another reason to hold it separately is that it has been held separately for at least the last 5 years. I don't know how much farther back we could look, but whenever in 19, when the commissioners said, let's keep all the elected people the same, except the sheriff, who we're gonna tie to the 5% above the undersheriff. That tradition has been going on for this county for at least 5 years.
Yeah, and I would guess that the sheriff's salary has been greater than the other electeds for a considerable period of time as well.
I have no idea, but.
I mean, that would be my guess. So,
And personally, I think it's one of the most important jobs in the county, and therefore can be singled out for a different treatment than the rest of them, maybe.
To argue that, yes, the sheriff is very important. I will not disagree with that. However, without a coroner, now the county has to spend money to hire out or subcontract with another county to have their coroner come out or ship bodies to them. With a clerk, paperwork doesn't get filed. You know, with the treasurer, money goes missing.
I'm not arguing any of those points.
So, while each one specifically individually functions perfectly for their job, in my personal opinion, we cannot keep comparing, job to job to job and saying that they're all the same or that this one sticks out, because each one individual sticks out. Devin?
Yeah, the whole argument about, well, the sheriff does a different job and should be reflected, it's already reflected. Even if we did nothing and we just froze the salary and we continue with the changes that we're proposing, the sheriff is still making, what, 50-something thousand more? $55,000 more per year, so we're already reflecting the change in the difference in the position from sheriff to the rest of them. So I'm not sure where that, what needs to change there to more reflect that difference. The undersheriff is union, is that correct?
No.
No.
Okay. Then strike that point. The other point that I'd like to make is in 2019, when we did this change, according to the notes, and I don't know if this math is correct, but that would reflect a 31% increase in the pay for the sheriff. So while the assessor, the auditor, and the commissioners took 1% raises, we gave the sheriff a 31% raise. So we've clearly already reflected the importance of the sheriff position in our county. So that's the only point I'd like to make on it.
Appreciate that. Roger, do you have any thoughts? No? Anybody not shared? Braden? Yeah, so with all due respect to the auditor, he's not a member of the commission. So if we want to open up for public comment, I'll take the auditor's comments during that period of time. That's, I think, the best way to approach that. So Braden, do you have any thoughts?
No, I mean, like I said, I think the general discussion is pretty much exhausted. My thoughts on the matter.
So, what I've heard, and the thought was to, I think Lee brought this up, to come up with, like, if we were to establish a number option, I'll say B, 'cause, that we do that. The most direct solution for doing so that I've heard, there's two. Keep the salary the same, freeze it through December of 2026. Or what Richard brought up, increase it by 3%, and that could be now or January 1 of 2025. Of those two options, which would get us to a number, is there any inclination like freeze or increase by that 3%? And if so, when?
Richards makes some sense to me in that 3% in December, January. The undersheriff goes up a step, which is roughly
2.5%.
2.5%, and then potentially a COLA, which is, let's say it's 2%, so that's, we'll say it's 5%. That puts the sheriff gap between the undersheriff less at the beginning of the year, but then we have a chance to come back and revisit that.
So what you're suggesting is a 5% increase January 1 of 2025?
No, I believe what Richard had said is no increase in May 1, and then an increase of 3%, or a dollar amount equal to 3%.
Right.
January 1.
Yes.
Okay, is that,
Yeah, that's kind of.
how does everybody feel
what I
about
had
that
in
if it's a set number? Anybody
It's a set number, I
disagree
think
with
that
that?
works. I mean,
It's a set number.
it
Brent?
still keeps them within like, I think 4% at the end of the day.
It also serves the function of breaking us away from that mandatory 5%.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, Roger's nodding his head.
January 1 of 2025.
Yes,
Yes.
January 2025.
Okay. Okay, so just to summarize, I'm seeing agreement by everybody that if it's a set number, no increase May 1, increase 3% January 1.
Yes.
Is that, did I get that sense right?
So, you got that correct, what people have been saying. The undersecretary will go up 2.5% plus probably get a pay, cost of living increase at that time.
Undersheriff.
Undersheriff.
So, and so that assumption
So that
is
will-
that it's 2.5%.
So that's 5% then, to make them even.
It would decrease the gap, if not make them even,
Yes.
depending on where the undersheriff lands.
The other consideration is that there would not be another salary change until January 1 of 2027.
And that would mean that if there was another cost of living raise during that time for the undersecretary, the sheriff would now go below the undersecretary.
And that approach is the same approach that's being taken for every other elected official.
Okay.
I mean, there's no further subsequent increase January 1 of 2026.
Yeah, we didn't put in the caveat. for cost of
So
living.
what I heard Jen bring up is a difference between 3% or 5% January 1. Does anybody have an inclination about that?
I would rather see the 5.
What if we reserve the power to change it
We
by
need,
coming back before December 1st?
we don't have that
I think
option.
We don't have that option?
We don't have that option.
I thought we could do whatever we wanted.
Well, that we, you're right, but that we don't. We have to make the decision by May 1 of 2024.
Well, yeah, we'd make the decision
And our
now.
next convening, based on the discussions that we've had, that Mark and Diane have had, correct me if I'm wrong, with the deputy prosecutors, so the next time we would convene is to make a decision prior, May 1 of 2026, for January 1 of 2027. We don't have the option to come and change salaries during that 2-year period of time.
I can confirm
Yeah.
We can
that
confirm that.
with the,
We didn't really talk about.
But for right now, that's our understanding, so therefore, that's why I'm saying we don't have that option.
So what we're doing is
So-
we're operating under a firm assumption that whatever we decide today is stuck for 2 years, period.
So we
Yeah,
have to
but-
assume that the COLAs or whatever,
We've taken that same approach for all of the other elected officials.
but are the COLAs already built into this? I mean, the way the chart's divided here, it doesn't show that the COLA
So-
covers the sheriff or the treasurer.
So the cost of living adjustments, as I described before, For those counties that are in black, it uses the 3%. For those counties that are in blue, it uses the Superior Court judge salary,
Right.
which has that increase and the cost of living and everything already included.
Yeah.
So the question, if it's a set number, is it a 3% January 1 increase or a 5% January 1 increase? I'm trying to keep us where the group is at.
And not being tied to the undersheriff's salary.
That's a separate, that's the next question. Right now, this is, if it's a specific
They're
number.
kind of related.
Well,
This is
what
the
we're gonna
specific
do
number.
is we're gonna take two different options back to the deputy prosecutor, and we're gonna
Okay.
say, can we have the option? If we don't have the flexibility, then we go with the one option versus the other.
figure at the end is gonna change
That's
drastically.
yes,
depending
correct.
on which way we.
Correct. So I'm just trying to get the group to make a decision about if it's a set number, what is that number? Is it,
Over our time.
okay. I'm not used to this, right, so, sorry. I'd entertain a motion to extend until 8:15.
I motion to extend the meeting until 8:15.
Second.
Any, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, very good. So, I'm just trying to get, option one is, or B, or whatever I called it, was to get a set number. And the other option will be to figure out what the formula is, that it floats, which is, I again remind the group, different than what we've done for the other elected officials. And I personally agree with what Devin shared, that there is a salary difference between the two that's reflective of the position. So January 1, where we've come to is increase of 3% or 5%.
Or another number.
Or,
So to make this
so
simple,
so let's just, do you have an answer?
I was going to make a
3%
motion
or
real quick.
5%? No motion, just 3% or 5%.
Okay, 3%.
3%.
There we go.
Thank you. All right,
Sorry.
any other
If
thoughts?
you do the math over the 2 years, if it was 5% on Jan 1, that would keep the gap between the undersheriff and sheriff still greater than the undersheriff, but not a huge margin. If you took, whenever they turn over, it's a step increase of 3 and maybe a COLA of 2, it probably would make them equal, or the sheriff would be a little bit above for.
Through the duration of this.
Correct, but it would not be as large, wouldn't be as
And is-
clear of a margin.
Is that 3% or 5%?
If we went 5, I think at
Five.
at January.
Are you changing your answer?
No, I was gonna ask Roger then. Kind of go around that.
Yeah, I'll do that part.
Again, the struggle with this position is that the median is, this position is already kind of at the median, which is where we discussed getting everybody to, so.
8% above the median.
Yeah, currently
Right.
it's 8% above.
Right, but we don't wanna take wages away, I don't think that's the group.
Right,
But-
yeah, that's pretty consistent.
But we also know that there is cost of living increases too, so where does that come in, so.
So I've heard 3% and 5% increase as of January 1 of 2025.
3 would be my number.
And that 5% or 3% is basically to represent the COLA, right?
That would be pretty
Yes.
much,
That's what I heard.
that would, Mary and Joe, I think that would be a pure COLA, right?
Yeah,
That's not a catch-up.
right.
So you're not making this easy. Roger, what do you think, 3 or 5%?
3.
3? Richard?
Yeah, well, 3 was my idea, but that was based on keeping it the same, as it is now, but adding 3%, not creating a situation where it was upside down with the undersheriff.
Yeah, you were trying to keep them in advance of that, and that's I think what Jan was trying to do too,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So this is a 5% bring you to more comfort that
Probably,
that's probably the
sounds like
case.
it based on the math that, the math
Five.
threw out there.
Okay, I'll go 5.
How about 4?
Okay.
I'd like to go 6.
So for right now, we'll do, May 1 note, so this is just one option, and we're gonna come back next week to make a final decision, that'll be our first action item, right?
Okay.
And January 1, the current, then plus 5%. So the other is a formula approach, and I guess my guidance on that would be, if it's a formula, that it be simple. So in other words, not salary plus this, or, you know, it floats every month based on the price of your Aqua coffee or something, right? That we keep it a very clean, straightforward formula. And based on my read of the resolution, again, this is my read, is that that goes into effect either now, we could effectuate a change May 1 and effectuate a change January 1 if we figure out what that formula is. If Mr. Whitehead says it could float for the duration of everything, then we could reconsider if that happens every January 1, in other words, January 1 of 25 and January 1 of 26. But what would the formula be if it was a formula-based salary? Currently, it's under sheriff plus 5%. What would somebody see as the formula be?
Under sheriff, step 10
So,
plus.
so under sheriff, step 10, plus what?
5%.
Plus 5%, okay? That's one option. Any others?
Current percentage of the Superior Court judge.
Yep.
The current percent of Superior Court judge, which is, what did I say, 70.2?
70.2.
Any other formula options?
I'm gonna stick with freezing the salary the way it is
Okay,
right
so
now.
you're not weighing in on this. We're gonna make a decision one way or the other next week, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're like, sort of figuring out if it's a formula base. And so,
You want my reasoning?
the
The reason is simple, that they already gave him the step raise before it's time, so he's getting part of that 5% right off the bat, since we're basing it on step 10, not this current step 9. I propose we raise the salary on January 1st, give him a 3.5% raise, and for the 27 budget, bring his salary to the average median as the same formula that we've used for all the other officials.
could you say that one more time, Brent? I'm sorry, I didn't
To
follow.
freeze his salary currently, and on January 1st of 25, give him a 3.5% cost of living increase, and then start the discussion to move him to the same type of formula that we use for everybody else, and bring him to the median salary of the compatibles.
Which right now would be 8% less than what he's getting.
In 2 years, that might be different.
Yeah.
You revisit it in
Could
2
be,
years
yeah.
and see what it's at least. We don't have to commit to moving him to a meeting, we can just revisit it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what I hear you saying, Brett, is we freeze it now, January 1, we increase it by 3.5%, and then we keep it there until the next time the group convenes, makes a decision by May 1 of 2026, and effectuate that January 1, 2027.
Yes.
So, okay, which is closer to the one-step approach, which I was hearing generally 5%, so.
I can live with 5%.
Okay, so that's that option is, so the formula options, what we have is under sheriff, step 10 plus 5%, effective when?
I would say Jan 1.
So I'm looking for the person that came up with that formula. When would you put that into effect? May
It would stay
1st?
where he is right now, and then the 5% above step 10, January 1st.
Okay, so, so freeze for May 1, and then what is that amount? Somebody calculated that, the step 10 plus 5%?
Step 10 plus 5% is 164,231.58.
Okay, so 164,232 is step 10 plus 5%. And then 70.2% of the SCJ as of
AOT reduction.
228, 261 times 0.70, 159,782. So that would be.
That was not my intent. My intent was the whatever percent of SCJ that his current salary is.
Yours would float, so.
Oh.
So in other words, you would suggest then that that be frozen, and it would be frozen until at least July 1 of 2025, because
that's when SCJ goes back up.
They change those every July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So then July 1 of 2025, we would have an increase, and July 1 of 2026 would have an increase.
Yeah, it would just tie us to the SCJs the same way the other, or 5 of the other counties are.
Okay, so does everybody understand the two formulas? Again, just to review, is that we would, on the formula basis, we would have the undersheriff step 10 plus 5% effective January 1 of 2025. Right? And the second formula, I'm not sure, so the second formula would be 70.2% of, or we would freeze it till now, we would it would be looked at July 1 of 2025 and July 1 of 2026. So of those two options.
And then that's not related at all to the steps.
Yeah. We would have an potential annual increase. Which, yeah, again, is not the same as what we've done for the other 6 elected officials. So, what's that? It's getting, you're almost there. So, of those two options, what are the thoughts of the group? I'll start with Brent, because I know you don't like either one. But if it was one of those two, which would it be?
Freeze it to 5% on January 1st, and then revisit it.
It's 5% of step 10.
5% of step 10.
Okay.
Let's see.
And Devin, I know you're sitting close to the.
Yeah. I also don't like either one, but I would do it off of the court judges, the Superior Court judges.
Okay. Roger?
I concur with Brent, with 5%.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with the 5% of the,
Step 10.
yeah.
Okay. Braden?
All right, yeah, you guys can hear me?
Yep.
Kind of torn on this subject. I mean, I'm honestly given, it's, above, sorry, my brain's just kept going to goo. Given that the position is higher than what the average is elsewhere, I would be in favor of freezing it.
And then would you want any increase January 1 or the step 10 plus 5%, or?
I think we should reconvene that later. I think right now they're, fairly compensated for what their, relative market value is.
Okay. So you're joining Devin and Brent in that camp, but
Yeah,
I think if there was an adjustment, it would be the one-time January 1
gotcha.
of next year, I
Gotcha.
think, right? So Richard?
Well, I'll keep an open mind on the subject though.
Great, awesome. That's
So what was the figure on your step 10 plus 5%?
164,232.
And then the other option,
Well, we would freeze it and then see what happened July 1 of 2025, presumably, because we're
with the Superior Court
$500.
judge time.
Yeah, we're
What was the number?
159,782. Yeah, we're $500 less than what the current sheriff's salary is. So my assumption is that based on looking at the history of the Superior Court judges, that it would move above the 160, but we don't know. We don't have July 1 of 2025 at this time. Looks like they published this like two years out, and then they stop, and then
Their salary commission reconvenes and then they set.
it again.
Yep.
I think this step 10 plus 5 is probably, if those two would be.
Mary Jo?
Step 10 plus 5.
All right, and Jan?
Step 10 plus 5.
Okay, and Lee?
I gotta stick with my SJ,
Who?
the Superior Court judge.
Okay, so what I'm gonna suggest is that we have two options based on, so there's 8 of us on the formula, including myself. I would go the step 10 plus 5%. That what I will do and is summarize our two options now. I'll put that into a memo to Mark to seek guidance from the deputy prosecutor to say, are either of these viable or not? I'll take that memo, revise it based on that response and say, both are viable, or one is and the other isn't, and here's the reasons why. And send that memo to Diane, have that circulated as part of our packet for next week. So then we have two options, not all these spreadsheets. We'll be looking at 2 different approaches for reaching the sheriff's salary next week at the beginning of our meeting. So, so what I have is option, or one of the options is May 1, no increase. January 1, a 5% increase from the current level, the 162.26. The other option is the undersheriff, step 10 of the undersheriff plus 5% January 1, and we would be frozen May 1, and then that would be the increase January 1 of 2025. And in both cases, that would then be in effect through December 31 of 2026. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I do that right?
Yeah.
And we would reconvene, yeah, that's right. And we would reconvene prior to May 1 of 2026 to establish what the salary would be January 1 of 2027. Glad thank you, Diedrich, for making sure this is on video. So, is that clear for everybody, and does that make sense for everyone? Okay. Thank you for a robust discussion.
I've got 2 things.
I do too.
I'd like to hear from.
So we're gonna open up for public comment from citizens, which was where if Mr. Dunkel would come in, we can do that now.
Before we do that, I'd like to ask if this commission could send thank you notes to these elected officials that responded so quickly and completely to our questionnaire.
I can absolutely do that. Can I send a thank you unilaterally, or do we need to run that through a public process? Sorry, I'm being kind of getting rummy myself, but.
You can send thank yous directly.
So I will send thank you, did you say cards or emails?
E-cards, just make it easy.
E-cards.
Whatever.
Okay,
E-card.
we will get a thank you on behalf of this salary commission for the quick responses. Thank you, Mary Jo. All right, so at this point, we have reached the public comment period. It's 3 minutes per person, which we don't have too many people, so I think that should be good. Is there anybody, Mr. Dunkel, would you like to make public comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Chairman. I have been communicating with our deputy prosecuting attorney, and I want to give you guys some guidance. One is that the resolution for the chartering the salary commission is looking to the commission for a salary dollar amount to implement. The resolution does not provide the option to implement a formula. Also, according to Tim, he affirmed that when the commission makes their salary dollar amount determinations and files those with the auditor's office, they are to be effective 30 days from May 1 or 30 days from the date of filing. So I think that's important for you guys to know before you get together next week to finalize the commission's findings.
Thank you very much.
Shot things in the.
Well, yeah, so, two things, I guess. One is, we'll look at the option that is the step 10 plus 5%. That's how we determine the salary. And we also concurred that it would happen January 1 of 2026. So if that's how we decide that number, yes, it's based on a formula, but it's not based on a floating formula throughout the duration of the time period, right?
Mm-hmm. We gave him the dollar
So
amount.
we would have a dollar amount. So I think that where we arrived at was a decision between two dollar amounts determined two different ways. So versus having something that floated in between, and I will reconfirm that. The second, the second thought that I have is during the last week, and I mentioned this at the outset of the meeting, that I had reviewed the implementing resolution as I was trying to begin to construct a draft resolution for the Salary Commission to pass. And by doing that, I pulled out each line item of the implementing resolution. And I raised a question, which I asked Mark to ask of Tim Whitehead, which was how the referendum process worked. And please correct me if I'm recollecting it wrong, because it was a little bit ago, and please indulge me if this won't take more than 2 minutes. We file our salaries on or prior to May 1 with an effective date of May 1st. They would not be implemented until after the 30-day resolution period ends, in which case that salary would be retroactive to May 1st. Did I get that right? Correct. If there is a referendum that is filed according to the deputy prosecutor, then there's other steps that start occurring. The deputy prosecutor has 10 days to come up with a ballot measure title. There's signatures that have to be collected. It goes on to the next ballot that takes place. And if the voters of Mason County support the decisions that were made, then the salary change goes back to May 1st of 2024. If they do not approve, then they stay where they are at currently.
You're only going to get a referendum if
So I'm sorry, sorry, Steve. Right now, we're not in public comment anymore. So I apologize, but I'm just sharing with the commission, the Salary Commission here, the information that was provided to me as chair of the Salary Commission from the county administrator and from Diane, who had conversation with the deputy prosecutor. So whether or not a referendum happens is sort of regardless. I'm just wanting to make sure that we're all on the same page and that I'm articulating what I heard at 4:45 this afternoon from Mark and Diane. Did I get that accurate, Mark, or is there any?
That is accurate based on our conversation with Tim.
Okay, thank you. So again, I will go back. I will summarize these two options and get that out to y'all. I would say sooner the better. You can tuck it under your pillow, you can post it on your fridge or wherever you'd like to have it, but we're down to that decision, and then also the approval of the resolution with the salary schedule attached for us to approve the third piece. And part of the reason for having the salary considerations page. And the reason I was pushing on wanting to make sure that I have the understanding of if we were to treat something differently, a different approach for the sheriff than the others, that we have that, so that talking points can be provided to the county, to provide to the media when, you know, potentially in the frame of a press release. And I'd like to have that in front of this group so you can have eyes on it. It's going to be critically important that after we adjourn next week, that we're all working on the same page, right? So that we have those talking points and we can speak to that in case anybody else asks us for it. This is how the commission reached its decision. We looked at these things, we considered these things, we got these decisions, and we put that into place so that we have that support. The fourth thing is we do need to go back, and I don't know if we'll be able to do this for next week, so we may need to convene sometime in the next few months, but not in the month of May, to revisit the bylaws about staggering based on our understanding now of when this group's decision points are. Again, that's May 1 of 2024, and the next time would be May 1 of 2026. We had half of the seats vacating in December of 2025. So we want to make sure that we have the experience and the background, I think, to go another round, which probably puts that into the second term of everybody here. So we'll look at that and see how we can potentially revise the bylaws for going to that next step. So we'll have to undo what we did, but getting the salary set by May 1 is the priority. So thank you very much. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary Jo and Jan. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Sorry for the extra time tonight, but we got a lot accomplished.
Jim, thank you for your leadership tonight and helping the discussion. This was